you for tuning in to another fun episode with your favorite Mouse-Moms. Jennifer, that's me. Hello, Lori.
Hi, guys.
And welcome back, Juliana.
Bonjour. I never said that in any of our intros ever.
You waited till you got back to the States.
Till you got back here. You're so weird. Well, welcome back. It's lovely to have you on our time zone.
Nice to be doing this in the morning.
Yay! Well, this week we have double the things to celebrate. We're, of course, celebrating Juliana's arrival back into the United States, but we are also celebrating an awesome guest today to our podcast. Her name is Dinah Bucholz. She's the author of the Unofficial Harry Potter Cookbook. So I'm really excited to change things up a little bit. Usually we're all about Mickey, but Harry Potter is my dude. So we're really excited to have her. We absolutely love this cookbook. We're excited to chat with her. Lori, can you tell us a little bit about Dinah, please?
Yes. So Dinah is a food columnist and a New York Times bestselling author of the wildly popular Unofficial Harry Potter Cookbook, which is published by Adams Media. Crazy. It's over 1 million copies sold, which is amazing. The Unofficial Harry Potter Cookbook, an expanded edition, as well as the Unofficial Narnia Cookbook. Love Narnia.
They need a Narnia theme park.
Right?
Oh, that would be so cool.
I know.
Everybody has to walk through a big giant wardrobe to get there.
See, Universal could put that one in there. So she started out with a degree in English, went to teach the subject, and then followed up with an editing job for a magazine publisher. But today she prefers to cook and write and take care of her family. And Dinah is from Philadelphia. So let's welcome Dinah in.
I feel like we need an applause button. Yeah.
Right.
We need sound effects. Welcome, Dinah.
Welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here today. We're super excited.
So we have a little bit of an initiation rite for all of our guests. And you've been warned. You know what it is. So the first thing you have to do before we get into talking about you is you need to give us a Mouska cocktail, please.
I have to give you sorry?
Mouska cocktail. Today's drink.
Oh, I have to talk give it?
Yes, please. Tell us your drink.
Did we not warn you?
We did.
I wasn't sure you said when you said give it. So sure.
Hand it over the interwebs.
Actually, the original edition of the Harry Potter Cookbook, which is the one that's available, does not have a recipe for butterbeer in it. And did I get flack for that? Harry Potter.
That you did.
Harry Potter fans are serious.
Oh, yeah. And the reason that I didn't include it is because I was worried about copyright. If J.K. Rowling invented it, then I can't make money off a recipe for it.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I happened to be doing some research and I came across, I don't remember if I came across it by chance or if I was looking for it, but I found a recipe for buttered beer, spelled with an E at the end, the old-fashioned way. I think it's a 16th century cookbook. And I said, wow, this is so cool. And besides for being cool, it's accessible. I can use this.
So was that your loophole?
That was my loophole.
Awesome.
And so when I proposed to my editor to follow up with an expanded edition, I included butterbeer. And so that's what I chose for the cocktail for today, the original butterbeer.
Perfect.
Now, people can't really agree on what butterbeer is. When I was doing research for the recipe, I found lots of online recipes for cream soda-like confections or cream soda-like slushies. But I think that whether J.K. Rowling knew about the original butterbeer recipe or not, the way it's described in the books matches the original recipe the most because it's served warm, it's comforting and satisfying. I don't think anyone would think of a slushie or cream soda as comforting and satisfying. It might be delicious because it's sweet and I'm a sugar fiend.
Definitely works on a hot day in Orlando.
Yes, exactly. But
that's
the way
kind of
Butterbeer
what they serve at the parks, right? Like a slushy.
They serve
so.
a hot version also, and the hot version is wildly popular, but they only serve it a couple of months out of the year when the weather demands it. So I've never had the hot version of it.
I have.
You
it's
have.
Delicious. Yeah.
Does it taste like just a heated up version of the?
It does. It's a bit different though. Like I feel like we've talked about like the regular butterbeer at the parks where it tastes more. It does. It tastes like a creamsicle or like apple juice
cream
type.
soda.
Yeah, cream soda type in there.
And butterscotch and
butterscotch. I
like
would say
marshmallowy.
The hot version has more of like a marshmallowy taste on the top, like with the foam. And then the actual drink itself, I'd say, is a little bit less sweet than the initial cold one. So I love the hot one.
But either way,
awesome.
what we're finding out here is that Universal's interpretation of butterbeer does not go back to the 16th century.
No, it doesn't sound like it.
Tell us what is in the 16th, you said 16th century?
Yes.
What is in 16th century buttered beer?
So it's
beer.
Heated ale. And you temper some egg yolks, which means you pour some of the hot ale and the beer really into the yolks and then pour it back in so that they don't cook.
Right.
You know, bits of hardened egg in your drink.
Scrambled eggs in your drink.
and it does have butter in it, real butter, but it doesn't have a butterscotchy flavor at all, and some spices. And that's pretty much it. And it foams up beautifully. I don't know if you ladies had a chance to try it.
I have not.
I'm scared of the eggs.
I was actually surprised. I was blown away at how good it was.
I'm gonna have to.
It's weird and good at the same time.
I know. I'm gonna have to try it.
It is strangely satisfying, and you can't eat anything for hours after. If you drink a whole portion, you can't eat anything for forever. It's really satisfying. So I was very pleasantly surprised by that. But it's a more sophisticated taste. It's not for kids.
Right.
No, which is probably why Universal went the total opposite direction.
Of course.
That's interesting.
Harry Potter's drinking it, right? So the kids want to drink it.
Yeah.
In Harry Potter, there is just a sort of a hint that it is mildly alcoholic because the elves can't handle
I remember that.
Low alcoholic content that's in there.
Yeah. So if you were to use alcoholic beer, just like a lager or a pilsner, like a light?
I think it doesn't matter. I think any kind of beer is fine.
All right.
You're adding brown sugar and cinnamon and nutmeg to it. It sounds very like
with a stout.
Yeah.
The brown sugar is definitely a modern innovation. I don't even know too much about what kind of sugars were available in that time period. They definitely had sugar because the original recipe, I'm pretty sure, if I remember correctly, calls for it.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I would have to look back. I wrote the expanded edition years ago, but I seem to remember that it did have sugar in it. And I know sugar is definitely mentioned. There's a 14th century cookbook. It was compiled in 1390.
Wow.
By the master chefs to King Richard II.
Oh my.
And there are recipes in there that do specify sugar. So they had something.
They had to have something.
Yeah.
It sounds interesting. It reminds me like of not really. I was going to say it reminds me, maybe the feeling just reminds me of like that hot apple cider, the mulled cider and stuff that's all comforting and warm and makes you feel all at home. But
you can imagine yourself in Hogsmeade, drinking.
In Hagrid's hut, sitting there in front of the fire. With my big cup of ale at 11 years old.
Right. It sounds like you've done.
They're all drinking it.
They're all drinking it.
Yeah.
It's not weird. Well, I mean, it's not unusual in Europe for kids to dabble and sample their parents' alcohol.
Right.
We make it weird here, I guess, but
right.
Interesting way to start the podcast. I like it.
It
love
sounds like you were talking about other cookbook recipes, mentioning sugar. So it sounds like you've done a fair amount of research into cookbooks of the past. Was this for the project?
Yes. I happen to be fascinated by food history, history in general, but I go crazy about food history. So it's fun for me. And one of my goals in writing this book was to write a cookbook that even if kids and grown-ups who picked it up didn't make a single recipe, it would just be fun to read. So I wanted to include interesting historical tidbits and also give a feeling for the culture of Harry Potter's world, for Americans.
Yeah. It's definitely, it's different than what we're used to as Americans for sure. So I love the way that the book is set up. Where you have a little bit of history of the food, but you also have remember this is from the book when Malfoy did X, Y, and Z. I love that too.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the books, I mean, I haven't read the books in so many years, but I've certainly seen the movies more recent than that. And you forget how much of the books are lost and didn't really make that transfer over to the movies. So it's a really cool reminder of I need to go read those books again.
Yes. The food in the movies is not as important as it is in the books. It's almost its own character in the books. There's just food everywhere.
Yeah, which is really cool.
Yeah.
Which is perfect for a cookbook author because it seems like you had, I was so, again, I have my more recent memory is of the movies. And so when I looked at how many recipes were in this, I'm like, how the heck did she come up with so much food? There's really not that much food in there. But like I said, I love that it goes back and it talks about this is from this and this is from this. And
so my publisher actually wanted more recipes than there was food for. I found about 100 references, which I thought was a nice amount for a cookbook, but they wanted at least 150.
Wow.
So what I did was I included as many food references as I possibly could that I could legally include, and then I took categories of recipes. So if she mentioned that it was winter and the kitchen elves were serving up stews and puddings, I went into research mode and I tried to find as many British stews and puddings, which means something different in British English than it does in American English.
Yeah.
Also a very interesting thing for me to learn. And I picked the ones that I thought were the most appetizing.
Right.
And because the British, they do have some really great recipes, but they also have some really gross things. So I picked the ones that I found, the most palatable to Americans. And I, that I could get 10 recipes out of that. Harry's first Hogwarts feast had, it says flavors of ice cream. And, I think the phrase is in every flavor you can imagine. So I went back into history mode and found classic British flavors like tea ice cream and brown bread ice cream, and which was shockingly good.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Well, and then bringing it back to Universal Studios, actually, in Florian Fortescue's ice cream parlor, they always offer really interesting. They always offer butterbeer flavored ice cream. But one of the other, they do a lavender tea.
They have a lavender tea,
yeah, which is always interesting too.
That's in the park.
Yeah,
in the park.
Yeah, that's in the theme park. So,
that sounds cool.
It was really good. And the butterbeer ice cream was really interesting. Also, definitely no beer in that one.
That sounds delicious.
It was really good.
It's pretty good. So obviously, Universal Studios, the Wizarding World of Harry Potter is definitely geared towards the movies. But it sounds like you did most of your research and everything based on things really from the book, because there's more food in the book than in the movies.
Yeah.
When did you, so it sounds like you're a food history buff and a foodie. When did you combine that? Like, what made you combine that with a love of Harry Potter? What was the spark, and how did you, well, first, how did you even, from the beginning, like, how did you become such a big Harry Potter fan? Because I'm assuming.
It's actually pretty funny because when I was when my husband and I were a young couple, and I think we maybe had one kid. I have 5. So I think it was like maybe after one kid, we were visiting my in-laws, and he had a younger sister who was, she must have been 12 or 13, and she read really dumb books. And sometimes I would just pick them up and read them. It was the weekend, and we have our, I'm an observant Jew, so we have Shabbat, which is a very relaxing day where you just really can't do anything but just relax. So out of boredom, I would sometimes pick up her books and flip through them. And one time she had the first Harry Potter book lying around, and I picked it up expecting it to be as dumb as the rest of her books. I was pulled in from the first sentence.
Weren't you so surprised, like how taken in you were immediately? That's how I felt about it.
Yes. That first sentence about the Dursleys being very normal, thank you very much. Oh my goodness. And I love her writing style. I have a degree in English, so I'm a sucker for good writing. The writing is so whimsical and almost quaint. I loved it. So I just fell in love with the writing style and the story itself. And so I started following it. As soon as a book would come out, I would be so excited, and I would read all the books so that I could remember all the plot lines and all the details, because one thing that J.K. Rowling did brilliantly was she didn't waste details, and things that seemed so trivial and unimportant were actually crucial later on. Like Harry Potter breaking that mirror, and the shards are in his suitcase and it ends up saving his life, things like that.
Crazy. Yeah.
Yes. So, and books later. So, I kind of started to really, I was able to like quote passages by heart because I kept rereading them. And sometime after the 5th book had come out, and honestly, this is how it happened. I was just driving around doing errands. It was after baby number 4. And she was a year old. She was sitting in her car seat, snoozing, and I'm driving back home from errands. And the words Harry Potter Cookbook flashed into my brain, just like that. I remember where I was turning. I remember exactly the street I was turning on when that happened. And I stopped short, and it's a good thing there were no cars behind me, because I was like, oh my goodness, that's such a great idea for a book. So I finished driving home. I stuck her in her crib. I grabbed the first book and a notebook and started rereading and jotting down all the food references.
That's insane.
I'll tell you what
wild.
I think the reason it popped into my particular brain, though, is that we had literary cookbooks lying around the house. So I think I made that connection. We had the Little House Cookbook, which is based on, the Laura Ingalls Wilder books.
Right.
And we also had, the American Girls doll collection. So we had an American Girls doll cookbook based on one of the book sets that comes with the dolls. So, and I always was a foodie, and my passion is writing. I have, like I said, a degree in English. I used to be an editor. So I think it must have been percolating in my subconscious for a while.
Well, it sounds perfect for someone like you, a writer, a foodie, and a Harry Potter fan. It's like a no-brainer now that you mention it.
Exactly. So I lost my train of thought.
I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
That's okay. That's totally fine. I don't think I have to say anything with, a vital national interest or something like that.
That's awesome. So the thought came into your brain, not really out of nowhere, because it does sound like that's such a natural, like, yes, it was an epiphany, but it was also probably like, well, duh, of course it goes together.
Yeah, I actually said to myself, somebody must have done this. And the first thing I did actually before I grabbed that notebook was to Google Harry Potter Cookbook, and there weren't any.
No one had done it.
When I Googled Harry Potter recipe, I got hundreds of thousands of results. So I said, ooh, this is a good idea because people are looking for recipes.
Yes.
Oh, I know what I was going to say. Because when I was reading the books, I was curious Harry Potter seemed to love things made with treacle, like treacle tar is mentioned a bunch of times. And I was like, what the heck is that?
Yeah.
You know? And then I found it in a cookbook somewhere and I tried it out of curiosity. This was before I had the idea. And I got to say, I was a little disappointed. It's okay.
So did you tweak recipes like that? Like, did you turn?
That was the only one.
Yeah.
That was the only one. But then once I had the idea, then I went crazy.
So you had this idea and then you looked, and then since obviously you were already in the world of editing, did you have connections already, or did you just send it out and see if somebody came back?
Nothing. I was an editor. I worked for a very brief period of time because after I finished college, I taught English for a year, and then I worked as an editor for 2 years. But I met my husband and we got married before I started working as an editor. And we had our first baby 10 months after we got married.
Wow.
So I continued working until he finished school and he took over. So I hadn't been in the editing world for years.
Okay.
And the kind of editing that I did was I worked for an industrial magazine as a copy editor. So I didn't have any connections there, nothing. So I was really, starting in the dark from scratch, no connections. And it was scary.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was very scary. Agents was the scariest thing. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm sending this to an agent, and then when an agent actually called me, I was terrified. I was like, oh my God, I'm talking to a real agent. Oh my goodness. Let me not say anything stupid, please.
But obviously, like you said, obviously there was a need for it. I mean, with the Harry Potter books were so popular. I mean, still decades after they were released and the movies came, and now you have, you can do tours of the studios in London, and there's Universal Studios in Orlando, and there's
I'm not
just
great with publicity. I have to be honest. I'm not great with publicity at all.
No, but people are dying for it. So there's like this inherent market there. So I'm sure when these agents contacted you, they realized that,
you know what? It was
this needs to happen.
It was just, I got so many rejection. My husband was very enthusiastic about it. But he said, I don't know if you're going to be allowed to do it because of copyright. So I said, well, let's try. And I had to have some sample materials. I had to work very hard and then send out proposals. And I just got rejection after rejection after rejection. And finally I said to my husband, but what am I doing wrong? Like, I thought people would be like, wow, this is great. Let's do it. Finally, I got a lot of form letters. Finally, I got a couple of form letters with something scribbled in the margins like, good idea, but worried about copyright. So I asked my husband, what do you think? People have written books about Harry Potter. Just when Harry Potter was in the process of being written, the books were still coming out. I don't know if you remember, people came out with predictions of what the next books would hold, and people would, all kinds of analyses about it. So my husband said, why don't you write to one of them? Just see what happens. So I reached out to George Beam. He's the author of, I think it's called Muggles and Magic. And you're familiar? Because you're not.
No, but it sounds like something perfect.
Yeah.
And I asked him how he did it and how I could get around the copyright issue, because no agents want to touch a book that a publisher won't want to touch because of a potential lawsuit attached to it. So he wrote back to me, and that was very exciting. A real author wrote back to me. Wow. And he was very kind. He wrote, a long email explaining all the possibilities and, options and whatever. But the upshot of all of it was that I should write a letter. He advised that I should write a letter to the legal team that represents J.K. Rowling and Warner Brothers. It's the same legal team. And he said that your worst case scenario is they'll say cease and desist, and that'll save you headaches down the road. And best case scenario is they'll say it's not a copyright issue, and then you can send that out to agents. You can send out that letter to agents. So it was actually easy to find the contact information for the legal team, because there was a copyright lawsuit going on right at that time.
Oh goodness, that doesn't scare you a little bit.
somebody wanted to write a Harry Potter lexicon, and J.K. Rowling was suing him for copyright, and he lost the case. So because it was in the news, her legal team was mentioned. So I knew who they were, and I was able to Google them and get their contact information. And I wrote them a letter, and I did not expect to hear back. But 6 weeks later, I got a letter. And the letter said, you can do this. It's not a copyright problem. The only thing you have to do is put unofficial in the title, and we're reserving the right to review the manuscript and any accompanying artwork before publication, and then you're good to go, which I found out later was very generous of them.
Did you die when you read that? I mean, how did you feel at that moment?
I probably danced around the house. I did that several times over the course of writing this book. So, like, for example, when I got a contract with an agent, and then when I got a deal with a publisher. So there was a lot of, that's really I just jump up and down and go crazy.
Just like jump through a hoop, survive, jump up and down, jump
through another hoop.
Yes.
So when
I did my little happy jig, and then
when you were going through all these hoops, did you ever imagine that it would be so? It sounds to me like you kind of knew it was a gem, but you just didn't know if you'd be able to get there.
Right. And I was ready to pay a publisher to publish it. I was like, I'll pay you.
You knew this was going to be big.
I didn't know it would be this big. I thought I would have been happy if it sold, the minimum that publishers look for, which is, I think, 10,000 copies or something like that.
And I would
be a bit more than that.
Yes. And what was perfect is the way that it's been selling worked out perfectly for me, because it's been selling at a very steady rate all these years. So that over 1 million copies is distributed came out in 2010. So it's going to be 11 years in September. So over that period, which was a nice steady income that allowed me to continue staying home. At the time that I was writing this book, we were very, 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 very tight financially. We weren't making it. We had 4 kids. 3 of them were in private school, and the youngest was a baby at home with me. And my husband and I were trying to figure out if it paid for me to work, because I would have to pay for childcare.
Right.
Because editors don't make a lot of money.
Right.
And that's when I had the idea to do this. So this allowed me to stay home, to continue staying home, which I really wanted to do. So it was such a blessing.
Awesome. That's fantastic. So, okay. So you heard back from the legal team. They said that this was a go. You could do it. You jumped through hoops. What was the next hoop?
So the next hoop was sending out that letter to those agents that did express interest but were concerned about copyright. There were 3 total out of all the dozens of rejections that I got. And only 1 took the bait. And the next thing I know, she didn't even contact me to let me know that she was interested. The next thing I know is I have a letter from her in the mail with a contract to sign. So I danced around the house, called my husband at work, went a little crazy. I signed the contract. I can't remember when we talked on the phone.
How long did you have after you signed the contract to produce a manuscript, to have all these recipes tested, and how was that process?
So technically, I didn't have to have anything beyond what was in the proposal until I got a deal with the publisher. They give you the deadline. Mm-hmm. But I continued working on it sporadically. And this whole process to get to this agent was a 2-year process. But it's because I wasn't working as if it was my day job. And, I worked on it when I felt like it,
mm-hmm.
A couple of hours here, a couple of hours there. By the time I got a deal with a publisher, I think I had about 80 recipes.
Okay.
Which was a nice chunk.
And you had to get to 150.
I didn't know that yet. I didn't know that until my agent called me and said, well, this publisher is interested, but there are a lot of buts.
So then how long did it take you to get from the 80 to the 150 once you found that out?
It took me a year.
Yeah.
But it took me a year because they gave me a year. I really did all the work in the last 6 months.
I would imagine it would take a really long time to develop and test all those recipes.
It was the last 6 months were very intense.
I bet. Wow.
Well, especially because you're doing all this research about, 16th century English recipes that
And also, I developed the recipes myself because I didn't want to. I mean, it's very easy to palm recipes off other people in terms of copyright. All you have to do is change it a little bit and you're good. I didn't want to be doing too much of that. So I wanted to develop my own recipes, which meant testing and retesting and retesting until I was satisfied.
So did you test all of these on your family? Do they just despise English food now? Or are they like mad at you forever?
They still talk about the chocolate stew.
Ooh.
The chocolate stew was beef and Guinness stew. It was in the section of stews and puddings. And I read that chocolate boosts the flavor of the Guinness. And so I should put chocolate in it. And so I think I must have put in a pound of chocolate into the stew because I'm a chocoholic. I can't help it.
If you're going to put chocolate, you're going to put chocolate.
I'm guessing that's not how the final recipe turned out.
So it wasn't edible. I slapped it onto my kids' plates and they all took one spoonful and spat it out. And so I took a spoonful and I spat it out. Okay. I said, I'm making you guys eat this.
Were they your worst critics, your children?
They actually were very helpful. They really were. And I knew that if I made something and it was gone before I had barely a chance to taste it, then
it's a winner.
I had a winner.
Okay.
Sometimes there was stuff that was really delicious, but not publishable. Like the fudge that kept turning it was just gloopy. It just kept being gloopy and it kept being gloopy until I figured out what I was doing wrong. You can't go wrong with butter and sugar and heavy cream, but it wasn't fudge. So yeah, the kids loved that. They loved the gloopy stuff. But they were very helpful. And
did they help out in the kitchen at all, or just as taste testers?
I hate answering this question because it's so embarrassing. I'm a control freak, so I just can't handle cooking with people in the kitchen. And if my kids want to make something, I have to leave the house.
Oh my God, that's so funny.
I cannot watch them making a mess or measuring things wrong or anything like that.
I'm this way too.
So the kids were your huge taste testers. Did they have an absolute favorite recipe or two favorite recipes?
They were pretty young when I wrote this book. My oldest is 22 now. So she was 12 and my youngest was 3 by the time I was done, I want to say. So I don't remember a favorite. But they liked all the sweet things. Anything with sugar in it was definitely very popular.
What about you? Do you have a favorite?
That's kind of like asking, do you have a favorite child?
All right, do you have top 5?
I get asked this question a lot and I never know what to say because I really liked a lot of the recipes. And they were my creations, so I'm emotionally attached to them.
Right.
But like I said before, I am a sugar fiend. So all of the sugary stuff and anything with chocolate in it is great. I mentioned fudge before. I never had real fudge made with a candy thermometer. I keep a kosher diet and it's not really, I don't think I've ever seen kosher real fudge. So I made it for the first time. I tasted it for the first time when I made it. And it was amazing. It took me a very long time to figure out what I was doing wrong.
Was the fudge your biggest nemesis?
What's that?
Was the fudge the hardest one to make?
It was the hardest. Yes, it was. I think I must have made at least 12 versions.
That's a lot of patience.
Different recipes, and they kept giving different instructions, and I just can't remember what it was that finally did it for me. But at some point,
even if you could remember, that's your secret now. That's top secret. That's yours.
I don't know. I don't remember what it was, but the fudge is my favorite, and also the toffee. There's a toffee recipe in there. I I also gained a lot of weight when I was doing the candy recipes.
But it was for work. I mean, we get that.
Yeah. You gotta do.
It's important.
And sometimes you just have to take one for the team.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
So do you have a favorite Harry Potter character now that you've spent so much time getting to know them and their dietary habits?
You know, I had a really good answer to this question. I'm trying to remember what it was. I had a really clever answer one time. I got a written interview once that I filled out. I love the written interviews because you can think about it and then and it sounds really smart. Who's my favorite character? I remember what I said. This was very clever of me. Mrs. Weasley, because she's a great cook.
Of course.
And she's a mom.
And she's a very motherly mom. And she has a lot of kids, sort of like me. I'm not as many as she did, but I've got a sizable family.
You do.
She's very relatable.
Very relatable.
Yeah, absolutely. So what do you think she would say about your cookbook?
I would have loved to be able to have her sample my cooking and tell me how awesome it is, because that would be a compliment that would be very meaningful.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That would be awesome. Of course, Miss Weasley. Of course.
Right?
I wonder how my recipes of her cooking, would really compare,
So what did you get from Mrs. Weasley? What were some of the items?
The toffee was from Mrs. Weasley.
Okay.
There are 2 fudge recipes in the book. One is Hagrid's treacle fudge that, glued Fang's teeth shut so that they were able to keep him quiet,
Yeah.
The one in my book will not glue your teeth shut.
That's good. That's a good disclaimer to have in there.
It probably tastes a little bit better than Hagrid's.
And you said
what's that?
Nope, go ahead.
And the other fudge recipe is Mrs. Weasley's. And the toffee recipe is hers. She sent that to the kids at Easter time, giving Hermione only a little bit because, oh gosh, I can't remember why.
Her father's a dentist, right?
No, there was.
Isn't her father a dentist?
Right. But the toffee was from Mrs. Weasley.
Right.
And it was because it was a rumor, some kind of rumor. I can't remember what it was. Okay.
I don't remember.
And Mrs. Weasley believed the rumor, and she was a little bit annoyed with Hermione because of the rumor, I think.
So
okay, any Harry Potter
payback.
fan listening now will say, you are not a true Harry Potter fan. Go away. I'm not
well, it's hard to remember all the little details that you picked out of there. That's crazy.
Yeah, a ton of details. I don't think anyone would criticize.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to ask, since you were telling us what recipes came from Mrs. Weasley.
There were more. There was like a savory recipes, like I have Molly's meatballs in there. Mm-hmm. There's a scene where at the ministry that people who are opposed to the Ministry of Magic's doings kind of congregate and secretly. So they're going to be meeting at the Weasley's house, and I think it's Mr. Weasley. He passes by one of the ministry people and whispers to them that they're having meatballs for dinner. So that was my inspiration for Molly's meatballs. There's the creamy onion soup that she pours out of the tip of her wand when Harry comes in the middle of the night in the 7th book, I believe. And I'm sure there's more, but I don't remember.
There's a lot.
Yeah.
So I'm finding, I don't know if this is toffee related, but I'm finding that Rita Skeeter wrote an article in Witch Weekly that made it sound like Hermione broke Harry's heart by going off with Victor Crumb. So she gave her a small Easter egg.
That's what it was. Yes. Yes. Okay. The Harry Potter fans will love you instead.
No, I Googled.
They'll love Google.
They'll love Google.
You know much more about the books than I have read them all twice, but I don't remember the details quite like you do. So I want to know one more thing about a recipe. What is your favorite recipe to come out of the very first banquet, the feast, when Harry first goes to Hogwarts? I'm sorry to put you on the spot. You could talk about any of them.
So I'm going to talk about, the ice cream. All the
Okay.
flavors, all of them.
All of them.
I do love good ice cream.
Yeah.
And there's nothing like homemade.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
But,
that is true.
You know, I would only make it. It's a pain.
Yeah, it's a lot of work to make ice cream.
Freezing the canister, and then if you want to make another batch, you have to clean it and refreeze it. So after I was done using it for recipe testing, I used it also for the Narnia cookbook, which sadly had to be pulled because there was a copyright issue that we thought it was resolved before publication, but it turned out there was a miscommunication and it wasn't, and we had to pull it.
Bummer.
It is such a bummer. It was such a nice cookbook. So after I was done with all of that, I kept it for a few years, and then I realized I wasn't using it at all. So I gave it away.
Yeah, it is hard to make.
A lot of work.
Yeah, but they were really good. They were really good.
I'm gonna try it. I'm gonna have to get an ice cream maker.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. So we do have a lot of Harry Potter fans who listen to us because of the theme parks. If you were to give them some advice from your cookbook, if they wanted to honor Harry Potter in the best way possible, and they were planning this grand feast, what would be some of the recipes that you would say you have to have these on your table if you're going to represent Harry Potter?
You have to have pumpkin pasties.
Ooh.
Yes.
Okay.
Everything else is optional, but pumpkin pasties have to be there on the table.
Everything else is optional. Well, now
I'm going to have to make them.
Yeah.
It's not because they're so incredibly, incredibly good. They are good, but it's because they're so Harry Potter.
I do.
Pumpkins and witches. I mean, it's just.
That's true. That's true. Yeah. That it's the whole feeling.
It's
I do remember him.
I recommend for Harry Potter themed Halloween parties. Yeah,
that's a good idea.
I love pumpkins. I need to look at these.
I
this
know.
needs to get made.
Pumpkin. Yeah, it's unnatural, actually. So you had. I'm bummed to hear that you had to pull the Narnia cookbook. I'm going to look for a black market copy, but there's a lot of food in that series as well.
Yes, and this was so cool. And this is one of the reasons why I'm sad that this didn't make it, because this was one of my funnest things about writing the cookbook was I discovered a quote from C.S. Lewis that said something like, "Eating and reading are two pastimes that combine admirably." And we put that on the back of the book because that was perfect. It was perfect.
Yeah.
He loved food. He really did. I mean, if you see pictures of him, you could tell. He just, I mean, he was a wonderful person in real life also. I did some research on him, and I was really a very, very good character. But he loved food, and it's all over the books, and it's just so, you feel so comforted when you read about the comforting meals that some of the, the characters had. And I didn't even think of it until my husband was playing the audiobooks in the car. This was after the Harry Potter Cookbook was published. And I'm listening, and I'm like, oh, I love Narnia. I'm rereading them. And I started rereading them, and I was blown away by how much food was in the series. And I said, this is another cookbook.
So that was my next question. I mean, it's sad that one had to be put to bed for now, but do you have any other ideas on the horizon? Like, I'm thinking this is a completely different genre, but, well, not completely, but Lord of the Rings, there's tons of food in there. Like, I'm thinking
just about to say. Okay, so what happened was with the Narnia cookbook was I had a different agent for that one, and he was supposed to take care of resolving the copyright issues. And he didn't finish resolving it, and we all thought he had. So I wanted to write a Lord of the Rings cookbook, and I said, I'm just going to take care of this myself, make sure that it's done right. And I reached out to the Tolkien estate, and they said, no way. Like, we're going to sue your pants off. I mean, obviously, they didn't say it like that. They didn't say it like that. They said it very politely with all their legalese and all the wiles,
right,
lots of wiles. Right. I love to use that word. I just love it. So I tried again when a few years later when Christopher Tolkien stepped down. And I said, well, now that there's like new leadership, maybe you might want to consider. This is my tribute to the great British
It's mutually beneficial,
fantasy
right?
writers.
When we talked to the Disney Unofficial Parks Cookbook author, it was the same. It was like, why not? It sells for them too, right? It brings fans something new. I don't understand why they would say no, frankly.
Yeah, they don't want to dilute their brand, maybe. I don't know. Or they're just very protective of it. So they said, sorry, our answer is the same.
Oh.
And so, yeah, that was very disappointing. Yeah, if you know anybody who has pull with the Tolkien estate.
I wish we did. I was
like super excited that I
had really good ideas for Lord of the Rings cookbook.
For sure.
Part of the thing with these fantasy genre books is that part of building these worlds is talking about all the great food that they're eating too. It goes hand in hand with that genre. So I mean,
I know they're not.
I kind of started a trend because after the Harry Potter cookbook came out, a whole bunch of unofficial cookbooks came out, the Hunger Games and Downton Abbey, which, funny story, I told my husband this, I said, what about a Hunger Games cookbook? And the very next day we found out that my publisher had contracted with somebody to write it already. And the same exact thing happened at Downton Abbey, and it was the same author. And I told my husband, she is living in my brain and taking ideas from my head.
Downton Abbey would be a great one.
I would definitely try the Downton Abbey one, but the Hunger Games one, it sounds a little disturbing to me.
It is a disturbing cookbook. There's a lot of recipes for stuff made with,
human
raccoons and
No, Downton
I wouldn't have been able to do it anyway because, with Harry Potter, there are some recipes that I could not test because of my kosher diet. I did hire a local chef to develop those recipes for me. Thankfully, there weren't too many of them because I was able to get away with, we don't eat pork products or shellfish, right? Mm-hmm. So that I gave over to somebody else to test for me. But we also don't eat mixtures of meat and milk. Mm-hmm. And I was able to test those because I just used milk substitutes and other kinds of substitutes for, butter or heavy cream. And then I figured, if it works with this, it for sure works with the real thing. And then I just wrote the real thing in the recipe. Yeah. So there were like only 10 or 15 recipes that I had to subcontract out of the over 150. But if I were trying to do a Hunger Games cookbook, there's no way I could test those recipes because almost none of the food that they ate was kosher.
Yeah.
and not really appealing sounding. So
and not very appealing either.
I think that's a loss.
It was just a novelty. It was just a novelty. Yes. Yeah.
Now, I'm thinking about the stew that they serve in the hob, and I don't want to eat that.
Yeah.
No.
Right.
Yeah.
And then people said, "Ooh, why don't you write a Twilight cookbook?" Do you remember when Twilight was all the rage?
I was just going to ask you about the Twilight because I'm like, that one would have gone really well.
So I read them, and it's not my kind of literature, but vampires drink blood. They don't really eat anything. So there wasn't anything in there.
No, blood stew, Bloody Marys.
I'm sure there's nothing we could suggest to you that you haven't already considered.
I would be happy to hear any suggestions anyway.
I'll think on it. Send you an email. We don't want all of our listeners to steal our ideas.
Oh, okay. Yes, send me an email.
But for the listeners, I think we do have a Mouska tip we could move on to. But thanks so much for joining us.
Yes, and
Thank you for having me. This was so much fun.
It was very fun. I love hearing about the process of, we're launching, we're building a business. And I love hearing about other moms who are building a business or have built a business. I would call yours a success so far.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's really neat to hear your story. And I'm excited to start trying some of these recipes.
We need to do butterbeer. We need to do it soon.
And pumpkin pasties.
pasties. I'm a little more excited about that because tempering eggs always scares me. I'm not great at it, but I'll have to try.
It's really not very hard. It's really not.
So you can learn how to do it.
It is.
I'm determined.
With Dinah's recipe.
I'm determined. I mean, I love a butterbeer, so let's do it. Well, we have a very easy Mouska tip for our listeners today. The Mouska tip of the day is to go out and buy Dinah's book.
That's a good tip.
If you have been listening to us for a while, you know that we're all about our food and drinks, and this is no exception. So if you want to combine that with your love of Harry Potter, this book is a must-have. It's sold on Amazon. As a reminder, we are also giving one away this week. We have an autographed copy. We have already posted on our social media how to enter that, and we will do a reminder there. But the deadline is Thursday at 10 a.m. Eastern, and then our winner will be announced during our live show on Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So definitely enter, go out and buy the book on Amazon. And thank you again, Dinah, for coming today and joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you. So thanks for spending another episode with us. What recipes have you tried from the Unofficial Harry Potter Cookbook? Share below or on our Facebook page. For the latest news out of Disney and Universal, sorry about the dog, guys. Don't forget to visit our blog at mousecamoms.blog.com and join our group on Facebook at Disney Planning and Chat by Mousecamoms.